All right, I'm delighted to say I'm joined here in the beautiful surrounds of inner city Tokyo by Rory Lawson. How are you, Rory?
Good, thanks, Owen. Yeah, very excited for what we've got to come this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. It's a beautiful view out there. Unfortunately, the light is just a little bit too bright, so that's why we're not standing in front of the window. You just got in last night, so you haven't really seen the wonders of Tokyo just yet.
No, I've had a wander around this morning, but no, I'm excited. It's obviously a sprawling city. It felt like it took me about a day and a half to get in from the airport, but no, it's a buzzing place. And by the sound of things, Rugby World Cup fever has really caught. You can see billboards everywhere, the sides of bus shelters, tube stations, the works, just with the Japanese rugby all over it. So here's hoping for a massive, massive tournament.
Yeah, it definitely took a couple of days to get going, but all of a sudden, just like that, yesterday, it's hit. The Rugby World Cup is here, and what a first weekend it is. We were just saying off air that there's a couple of humongous games, obviously, this weekend, but you can really make an argument that Ireland-Scotland is the biggest one.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I think everybody's, already, the first question people ask, oh, so who's your final? Who's going to win it? But then this weekend can dictate a lot. And certainly for Scotland and Ireland's pool, I think given Ireland obviously go back-to-back Scotland and then take on Japan. For Scotland, it's Ireland first up, then Samoa, then Russia, and then Japan at the last. But this game will go a long way to dictating who comes out on top of the pool. And it's a tough one to call. I think every neutral or Irishman that I've spoken to or heard discuss it have said Ireland are favourites, and probably justifiably so. But Scotland will be looking to bring a surprise for sure.
This ain't any 2018 fixture between Scotland and Ireland. You would have to say that the gap between them has closed considerably in the last 12 months.
Yeah, I think so. It's really difficult to really understand where both sides are right now. I think the World Cup warm-ups are always exactly that. The warm-ups are game time, opportunity for players to come in. But equally, you've got to take into account that it's very different to a Six Nations campaign whereby you put your cards out on the table early. In this, both coaches will have held a bit back. They'll have held some plays back. They'll have held some systems back. They'll probably have, they'll certainly have kept a few tricks up their sleeve. So it's difficult to judge exactly where both sides are. But Ireland justifiably favourites coming into it. They've the only side I think to have turned over New Zealand twice in the last couple of years, and they've come in as ranked world number one, which for me probably suits Scotland because Scotland have gone about their business fairly quietly, albeit everyone talks about them as being a real threat to any side.
That world number one thing does get thrown in there a little bit to almost heap unnecessary pressure on Ireland, because it's obviously a little bit of a joke that they are world number one, but still one of the top sides. They will be favourites going into this weekend. But being at one of the Scotland press conferences during the week, there's a quiet confidence about this team that they can cause what wouldn't really be a massive upset, but kind of upset the bookmakers to a certain point.
Yeah, I think so. I think for Scotland, I'm really hoping that Gregor Townsend's squad have learned from the last couple of years, and that the games that they've played against Ireland and struggled in over the last couple of years. If you look at Six Nations, this year was a bit of a strange one because you ended up Stuart Hogg getting injured, Ryan Wilson getting injured, Hugh Jones getting injured, and it was a game that was just full of really bad injuries that impacted on Scotland for the whole Six Nations campaign. The year before, a comfortable victory for Ireland in Dublin, but not without a couple of Scottish chances. I'd say three gilt-edged Scottish chances, which had they taken, the scoreline certainly would have been closer. I think for Scotland, Gregor Townsend and Joe Schmidt have both targeted this World Cup from when they came into the jobs. I think Gregor Townsend, in the job for 2 years now, has as strong a Scotland squad as has ever been taken to the World Cup, but they're still being talked about as being, quarter-finalists. And a number of people are talking about that Scotland-Japan game being, the big one and getting them out of this group. For Scotland, they want to start this campaign with a win. They want to start with a win over Ireland and blitz their way through the pool and come out number one seeds. And then we'll see you go into quarter-final, and quite rightly, either South Africa or New Zealand would be a favourite in that game. But, it's easy to say game at a time, but when it's the first game's Ireland, that is your focus.
Where will Scotland be targeting Ireland this weekend?
Scotland will be looking at themselves first. Against Ireland, you have to start the game well. You've got to get your set piece right, and you've got to get your systems right. Scotland struggle against Ireland when they make mistakes, when they cough up possession too easily, and when they get themselves behind. I would say Ireland are about the best team in the world at defending a lead. I think they'll go after the Irish set piece. I think if you look at Ireland, when they struggle, it's around the set piece, line out in particular, and potentially without Devon Toner, their main target man in that line out. Scotland will probably look to get a couple of guys up in the air and potentially force Rory Best to throw to the back. We've seen Ireland struggle in that area on a few occasions. I think also, if you look at the way Ireland have defended recently, they've got the potential to defend a little bit tight. Often you find the winger, on the 15-metre line, and knowing the distribution skills that are going to be in this Scottish midfield, if they can get front foot ball from set phase play, then they'll have the opportunity to get into those wide channels and make some yards. And then, above anything, you've got to be able to diffuse the Irish kicking game and stay patient in the game, because they're a patient side, Ireland. They like to build themselves into a game. They like to dominate the territory and possession. So they'll have to be a bit destructive defensively and in around the breakdown, get the scavengers on that ball, but ultimately they'll have to. I think the defence has to make some use the line speed and make some destructive tackles to be able to force errors rather than waiting for unforced errors.
It's very interesting. Like, there's 3 definite areas there that you pointed to that Scotland will definitely be targeting this weekend. The one I want to focus on is Ireland perhaps defending a little bit too narrow. And is that something that any team, not just Scotland have a bloody good back 3 that they can target it, but out wide, are Ireland susceptible without the ball?
It's easy to say yes. Any defence, if they're compromised in the first couple of phases, are vulnerable to being attacked wide, because if they defend wide, then they're vulnerable in the midfield. The reality is, if you get your first couple of phases right, then the defence struggle to get round the corner and they struggle to get that line speed. We know with Ireland, we know with England, we know with South Africa, it's all about the line speed. And actually, in almost without exception, the reason they defend the way they do and can defend that way is because the defence gets dominant, and they're not fussed about the guys 2-3 men out on the outside, because they're looking to shut down that attacking play well before the ball gets there. What I would say with Scotland is that I think in Finn Russell, they probably have the best attacking kicker of the rugby ball in the world game at the moment. And I think his low-flighted cross-fielders, kick passes, his little dinks over the top are very effective. And without wanting to give possession away, I think that'll be part of the game that Scotland look at.
If it rains on Sunday, I don't see why anybody is saying that's a good thing for Scotland. I think for the reason that you just pointed out there, on a dry day, Finn Russell almost becomes the most dangerous man on the pitch.
Yeah, so it's one of the big things about the way that people have made their predictions and spoken about this tournament is the climate's going to be different. We'll probably see a few monsoons in games, not just rain, but monsoons. Otherwise, it's probably going to be hot for spells and humid. There's going to be a sweaty ball, and that can arguably be worse than a rain-wet ball. So I think Scotland will have to adapt to the conditions. One thing for me with Gregor Townsend and the development of his strategy, I think Scotland have to understand how they can manage a game whereby a defence is on top, the ball is difficult to handle, therefore you can't play from 70 metres out from the opposition's goal line. You need to manipulate defences and understand how you get yourself possession. Even if it's the halfway inwards, you're still not at risk of conceding 3. And it's definitely going to be something that Gregor will have worked very hard on with his decision makers, with his pack of forwards, who I think are a match for most now. I don't think they've got the same vulnerabilities as in previous World Cups or previous Six Nations championships. I think the pack should be able to give them a platform, but we're relying on a lot. We're relying on people peaking at the right times. Mistakes will be made, but how catastrophic are they? How hard is the work that's put into covering up those mistakes?
I'm very interested to get your take on Conor Murray's form, because there's been a lot of question marks about that in 2019. As you say, I think for both sides, you can look at a lot of players and say, well, they might just peak for the World Cup, and that's that, and we were wrong all along. If you were an Irishman, would you be a little bit concerned with the form he's shown this year?
Yes, because Conor Murray on his day is certainly one of, if not the best scrum half, and certainly at playing the way that the Irish have been most effective in the last couple of years. He's not quite got back to where he was before he picked up the injury, and he's a player who understands how good he is, and he'll have been frustrated not to have been operating at that level. But you want to peak at World Cups. He'll be, if he goes into this tournament and has an outstanding tournament, then, and he's a class player. He is very, very good. Then nobody will be talking about his injury of 18 months ago, or his form of the 18-19 season. These guys will have had a good pre-season. They'll be ready. He'll be fired up, and he'll be very keen on cementing his position as being the main man in that team, because Johnny Sexton is so important. He is the conductor. He is Joe Smith's henchman. But you've also got Conor Murray, who is such a big part within that Irish team as well. When he ticks and Sexton tick, Ireland play rugby in the right areas. They squeeze oppositions. They force oppositions into mistakes, and they give their side opportunities to score points. And in big games, in big tournaments, that's what you need.
What is your thoughts on Ireland's box kicking game? Because it's something that they went away from at times in the rugby, in the warm up games for this Rugby World Cup. But when Conor Murray came back into the team, it seemed that they kind of resorted back to it at times. They might be striking a bit more of a balance at this point on the box kicking game.
Possibly. If I'm honest, I think if they're put under pressure, they will go back to type. I think Conor Murray's absence maybe forced Ireland to develop their game elsewhere. And I think if you look at the Wales example, they developed their attacking game when injuries forced them to play a different way. And I think Ireland have looked that way. And again, you go back to the sort of smoke and mirrors and not wanting to show your best hand too often. Ireland, when they were knocking over the All Blacks and when they were winning Grand Slams, played that box kicking game. They played the territory game, and maybe they've moved a little bit away from that with a view to coming back, so that teams don't just solely focus on stopping that. You stop Ireland, putting some other questions into opponents' minds to have them focus elsewhere. But it would definitely be a big asset in Ireland's game. They use it so effectively, but potentially they'll go back to it.
Just one other thing I wanted to chat to you about before we get into the prediction for the weekend. It's just about careers ending prematurely. Like the Denton concussion is something that's come up over the last couple of weeks, obviously. Probably not getting as much airtime because we're looking ahead to the Rugby World Cup, and the concussion conversation is one that we've had quite a bit on the show. But I guess from your perspective, I'm right in saying that your career ended prematurely as well with injury. It was a wrist injury on your case. Like, obviously, concussion is its own kind of barrel of kind of wonders when it comes to conversation, and it'll go on and on and on over the next couple of months and years. But when it comes to a prematurely ending career, what must players like that be thinking when it's all taken away from you so quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I've been there, and it's really tough to take. And I think, as with everything, you're thankful for the opportunity that you had. Now, I had 11 years playing professional rugby. Dave Denton had 10 years. He played for Scotland. I think 40 plus times. He had a good career, but he's only 29 years old, and he's having to leave the game with a head injury. And there's a lot of life after rugby, and it's incredibly tough to take, and it takes a long time for that pain to pass and to stop missing the game, and stop missing the camaraderie and moments like this, World Cups and playing for your country and being around your best mates on tour. Those are the best days of your life. Things will settle down, but undoubtedly it's something that's difficult. I think career-ending injuries happen across the board. You'll get ankle, knee, hip, back, necks, heads, shoulders, knees and toes. And, I think that's the difficulty of it. I think with the concussion, we have to, whilst it's incredibly sad, we have to look at it as a positive, that these things are being identified and they're being looked after, and head injuries are increasing or documented head injuries are increasing, but at the same time, that's because the care of players is improving, and the occasions in which they're happening aren't increasing. I don't think. I think it's more that the identification of when it happens is increasing. And Dave Denton will watch on now as a Scotland fan, and he'll be frustrated that he's not here with that squad, like many others will be. But at the same time, he had a great career and one that he can be very proud of.
What age were you when it all came crumbling down because of the wrist?
I was 32, so it was a bit different. I think I probably had a couple of years left in my legs, maybe at the top end of the club game rather than the international game. But at the same time, when you're not giving something up by choice, it's tougher to take.
Right, call it for us, Rory. Who's going to win on Sunday?
Well, it's a true head over heart, isn't it? And I bring so many things into the equation, because no Irishman or woman wants to be reminded of Ireland's record at Rugby World Cups. So Ireland carry that in. Scotland, minimum requirement is the quarter-final. They're coming in as an underdog, and justifiably so. They're only 1 from 7 in their recent outings against Ireland. So I think Scotland can do it this weekend. I think Ireland have lacked consistency, and if Scotland get out the blocks and start well, then I think Scotland can win this game. If they don't, and they make the mistakes that they've made in recent games and let Ireland get a grip on the game, then I think it'll be the men in green who win. I'm almost sitting on the fence there, but if I'm voting on my head, then I'm saying Ireland will edge it. The beauty is, if Scotland can go through the rest of the pool unbeaten, it won't matter. They go on and they play either New Zealand or South Africa, and we'll see what happens off the back of that.
Get your prayers in for a dry day, Rory. Thanks a million for chatting to us this morning.
Thanks.